Marcus Kane stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 42nd floor, watching the city below buzz with afternoon traffic. His reflection stared back at him, sharp jawline, steel-gray eyes, and a face that rarely showed emotion. At 34, he had built Kane Industries from a small tech startup into a billion-dollar empire, but success had come at a price that most people couldn't understand. The elevator chimed behind him, and his assistant Jennifer walked in with a stack of files. She had been working for him for 3 years and knew better than to expect pleasantries. Marcus turned from the window, his expression as cold as the December air outside. "The quarterly reports are ready for your review, Mr. Kane," Jennifer said, placing the files on his mahogany desk. "Also, the charity gala committee called again about your attendance at the hospital fundraiser next week." Marcus barely glanced at her. "Cancel it. I don't have time for social events." "But sir, this is the 3rd charity event you've declined this month." The board members can focus on profits instead of parties," Marcus cut her off. "Is there anything else?" Jennifer hesitated for a moment. "Actually, yes. There's someone here to see you. She says it's about your father." Marcus froze. His father had been dead for 15 years, and Marcus rarely spoke about him to anyone. The mention of his father brought back memories he had buried deep. Memories of a man who had loved too freely and trusted too easily, only to die heartbroken and betrayed. "Who is she?" Marcus asked, his voice even colder than before. "Her name is Sarah Chen. She's a nurse at Mercy General Hospital. She says she took care of your father during his final days." Marcus felt something stir in his chest, but he quickly pushed it down. He had learned long ago that emotions were a weakness he couldn't afford. "Send her up. 5 minutes." When Sarah Chen entered his office 10 minutes later, Marcus was struck by something he hadn't expected. She was beautiful, but not in the polished, artificial way of the women who usually tried to catch his attention. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore scrubs under a worn winter coat. Her eyes were warm and genuine, completely different from the calculating gazes he was used to seeing. "Mr. Kane, thank you for seeing me," Sarah said, her voice soft but confident. "I know you're a busy man." Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk but remained standing. "You have 5 minutes. What do you want?" Sarah didn't seem intimidated by his cold demeanor. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden box. "Your father asked me to give this to you if I ever had the chance. He talked about you often during his last weeks at the hospital." Marcus stared at the box, but didn't reach for it. "My father died 15 years ago. Why are you bringing this to me now?" "I kept it all these years because I promised him I would find you someday," Sarah explained. "I was just a nursing student then, but your father was special. He was kind to everyone, even when he was in pain. He told me about his son who was brilliant and successful, but who had closed his heart to the world." "My father was a fool," Marcus said harshly. "He trusted people who didn't deserve it, and it killed him." Sarah's eyes softened with understanding rather than judgment. "He said you might say something like that. He also said that underneath all that anger you were just a scared boy who missed his dad." Marcus felt his carefully constructed walls shake for just a moment, but he quickly reinforced them. "You don't know anything about me or my father. Take your box and leave." But Sarah didn't move. Instead, she placed the wooden box on his desk and stepped back. "Your father saved my life once. I was in a car accident during my first year of nursing school. I had no family, no money for the medical bills. Your father paid for everything anonymously. I only found out it was him when he was dying, and he made me promise to find you." Marcus looked at the box, then back at Sarah. "Why? What did he want from me?" "Nothing," Sarah said simply. "He just wanted you to know that he never stopped loving you, even after you stopped visiting him, and he wanted you to know that it's okay to let people care about you again." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the heating system. Marcus could feel something breaking inside him, something he had kept locked away for years. But he couldn't afford to break. Not now. Not ever. My father's love got him nothing but pain, Marcus said finally. People used him, lied to him, and left him when he needed them most. I learned from his mistakes. Sarah picked up her coat but left the box on the desk. Maybe you did learn from his mistakes, but maybe you learned the wrong lesson. As she walked toward the door, Marcus found himself speaking without thinking. Why did you become a nurse? Sarah turned back, surprised by the question. Because your father showed me that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can save someone's life. I wanted to do that for other people. After she left, Marcus stood alone in his office, staring at the wooden box. He had built his entire adult life on the principle that emotional distance was strength, that caring about people was a luxury he couldn't afford. His father's death had taught him that love was dangerous, that trust was foolish, and that the only person he could rely on was himself. But something about Sarah Chen had shaken him in a way he didn't understand. She had looked at him without fear, without the hunger for his money or status that he saw in most people's eyes. She had spoken to him as if he was just a man, not a powerful CEO to be impressed or intimidated. As the sun set over the city, Marcus finally reached for the box. Inside, he found a letter in his father's handwriting and a small photograph of the two of them from when Marcus was 12 years old. They were both smiling, their arms around each other, taken during what had been one of the happiest days of Marcus's childhood. The letter was brief but devastating in its simplicity. My dear son, I hope someday you find someone who sees the good man I know you can be. Love is not weakness. It is the only thing that makes us truly strong. Always your father, David Kane. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair, the photograph trembling in his hands. For the first time in 15 years, he allowed himself to remember not just his father's death, but his father's life. The way he had always helped their neighbors, the way he had volunteered at the local shelter, the way he had tucked Marcus in every night and told him he was proud of him. Outside his office windows, the city lights began to twinkle like stars, and Marcus realized that somewhere in those lights was a nurse named Sarah Chen, who had just turned his carefully ordered world upside down. 3 days had passed since Sarah Chen's unexpected visit, and Marcus Kane found himself unable to concentrate on his work. The wooden box sat on his desk like a silent reminder of everything he had tried to forget. He had read his father's letter dozens of times, each word cutting deeper than the last. Jennifer noticed his distraction during their morning meeting. Sir, you seem different today. Are you feeling all right? Marcus looked up from the quarterly reports he had been staring at without reading. I'm fine. Schedule a meeting with the hospital board for this afternoon. The hospital board? Jennifer looked confused. Which hospital? Mercy General. Tell them Marcus Kane wants to discuss a significant donation. Jennifer's eyebrows raised in surprise. Marcus had never shown interest in charitable giving before, much less hospitals. Of course, sir. May I ask what changed your mind? Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't explain that he needed to see Sarah Chen again, that something about her had been haunting him since she left his office. He told himself it was just curiosity, but deep down he knew it was something more dangerous than that. 2 hours later, Marcus walked through the sterile hallways of Mercy General Hospital. The smell of disinfectant and the sound of machines beeping brought back painful memories of his father's final days. He had only visited twice during those last weeks, unable to bear seeing the man who had once seemed invincible reduced to a fragile shell in a hospital bed. Dr. Patricia Williams, the chief of staff, greeted him warmly in the conference room. Mr. Kane, this is quite an honor. When we heard you wanted to meet with us, we could hardly believe it. Marcus shook her hand politely. I understand you're in need of funding for a new pediatric wing. Yes, we've been trying to raise money for over 2 years now. The current children's ward is overcrowded and outdated. We need $3 million to complete the project. Marcus nodded. I'll write you a check for $5 million. But I have one condition. Dr. Williams looked stunned. Of course, anything. What can we do for you? I want a tour of the hospital, specifically the areas where terminal patients receive care, and I want one of your nurses to give me the tour. Sarah Chen. Dr. Williams looked puzzled by the specific request, but she wasn't about to question a $5 million donation. I'll see if Nurse Chen is available. 20 minutes later, Sarah appeared in the conference room doorway, looking surprised and slightly wary. She had changed from her scrubs into jeans and a simple blue sweater, but she still looked tired from what Marcus assumed had been a long shift. "Mr. Kane? Dr. Williams said you requested me specifically for a tour?" Marcus stood up, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. "Yes, I want to understand how this hospital operates before I make my donation." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you need me specifically because you knew my father. You can show me the kind of care he received here." For a moment, Sarah studied his face as if trying to read his true intentions. "All right," she said finally, "but I should warn you, some of what you'll see might be difficult." As they walked through the hospital corridors, Sarah explained the daily routines, the challenges the staff faced, and the stories of patients she had cared for over the years. Marcus found himself watching her more than listening to her words. She spoke with genuine compassion about people she barely knew, and she seemed to remember details about patients from years ago. "This is the room where your father stayed," Sarah said quietly as they stopped outside a private room. "He was here for 6 weeks." Marcus stared at the closed door, his jaw tight. "I should have visited more." "He understood why you didn't," Sarah said softly. "He told me you were angry with him for getting sick, for leaving you alone in the world." "He didn't leave me alone," Marcus corrected harshly. "He chose to trust the wrong people. His business partner stole everything from him. His friends disappeared when the money was gone. His own brother refused to help with the medical bills. He died believing in people who never deserved his faith." Sarah touched his arm gently, and Marcus was surprised by how much comfort that simple gesture provided. Maybe those people failed him, but that doesn't mean everyone will. They continued the tour, visiting the children's ward, the emergency room, and the intensive care unit. Everywhere they went, Marcus watched Sarah interact with patients, families, and other staff members. She remembered names, asked about grandchildren, and somehow managed to bring smiles to faces marked by worry and pain. In the children's ward, a little girl with cancer recognized Sarah and called out to her. "Miss Sarah, did you bring me a story today?" Sarah's face lit up as she approached the bed. "Hi, Emma. I don't have a new story today, but I brought a friend." She gestured to Marcus. "This is Mr. Kane. He's helping us build you a better hospital." Emma looked up at Marcus with curious eyes. "Are you a doctor?" "No," Marcus said, feeling awkward and out of place. I run a company." "What kind of company?" Emma asked. Marcus glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "We make computer programs that help doctors take better care of patients like you." "That's cool," Emma said. "Miss Sarah, can you tell Mr. Kane about how you read to us every Tuesday?" Sarah looked embarrassed. "It's nothing special. I just come in on my days off sometimes." After they left Emma's room, Marcus found himself walking slower, not wanting the tour to end. "You volunteer here on your days off?" "Sometimes. The kids get lonely and reading helps pass the time for them." "Don't you have your own life? Family? Friends who want to spend time with you?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I suppose I do this because it feels like the most important thing I can do with my time." "These kids don't have anyone else. What about you? Don't you want someone to take care of you?" Sarah stopped walking and looked at him with those warm, genuine eyes that had been haunting his thoughts. "Everyone needs someone, Mr. Kane, even people who think they're better off alone." They had reached the main lobby, and Marcus realized their time together was coming to an end. He felt a strange reluctance to leave, something he had never experienced before. "The donation," he said suddenly. "I want to make it in my father's name. The David Kane Pediatric Wing." Sarah smiled, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He would have loved that. He always said children were the future. "Will you—" Marcus started, then stopped. He had been about to ask her to have dinner with him, but the words felt foreign in his mouth. He had never asked a woman out for any reason other than business or physical attraction. This felt different, more complicated. "Will I what?" Sarah prompted gently. "Will you oversee the project? Make sure the money is used properly?" Sarah looked surprised. "I'm just a nurse, Mr. Kane. I'm not qualified to oversee a multi-million-dollar construction project. You're qualified to make sure it serves the patients properly. That's what matters to me." Sarah studied his face again, and Marcus had the unsettling feeling that she could see right through all his defenses. "Why is this really important to you?" Marcus looked around the hospital lobby, at the families waiting for news about their loved ones, At the volunteers helping elderly patients find their way, at the doctors and nurses hurrying between crises and miracles. Because my father died believing that kindness mattered, he said finally. Maybe it's time I found out if he was right. As Marcus walked back to his car, he realized that for the first time in 15 years, he was looking forward to something that had nothing to do with business profits or market dominance. He was looking forward to seeing Sarah Chen again, to learning more about the woman who had somehow managed to crack the walls he had spent years building around his heart. But what terrified him most was the growing realization that Sarah Chen might be exactly the kind of person his father had always believed in, someone who could love without expecting anything in return, someone who could be trusted with the fragile pieces of a broken heart. 2 weeks after the hospital tour, Marcus found himself doing something he had never done before, leaving work early. He told himself it was to check on the pediatric wing construction plans, but he knew the real reason was to see Sarah Chen again. She had been occupying his thoughts in ways that both frustrated and intrigued him. When he arrived at Mercy General, he discovered that Sarah was in the middle of her shift in the intensive care unit. The head nurse, an older woman named Margaret, directed him to the ICU waiting room. She's with a family right now, Margaret explained. Their 8-year-old son was in a car accident. It's been a difficult day. Marcus waited in the sterile hallway, watching through the glass doors as doctors and nurses moved with practiced urgency. After an hour, he saw Sarah emerge from one of the rooms, her face etched with exhaustion and something that looked like grief. She noticed him immediately and walked over, surprise evident in her eyes. Mr. Kane, is everything all right with the construction project? The project is fine, Marcus said, studying her face. You look like you've had a rough day. Sarah's composure cracked slightly and she looked away. We lost someone today, a little boy named Michael. He was the same age as my nephew. Marcus felt an unexpected surge of protective anger. Where's his family? Are they being taken care of? His parents are. They're devastated. There's nothing anyone can do to make this better. Marcus watched as Sarah tried to pull herself together, straightening her shoulders and wiping away tears she probably didn't realize had fallen. In his world, people hid their emotions behind masks of professionalism, but Sarah's grief seemed genuine and raw. When do you get off work? He asked suddenly. Sarah looked startled by the question. In about an hour, why? You shouldn't be alone tonight. Mr. Kane, Marcus, he corrected. And I'm not asking for anything inappropriate. I just think you need someone to make sure you eat dinner and don't spend the night replaying today in your head. Sarah studied his face, and Marcus found himself holding his breath, waiting for her response. He had never made an offer like this before, had never felt compelled to take care of someone else's emotional well-being. Okay, she said finally, but somewhere quiet. I'm not in the mood for crowds. An hour later, Marcus found himself in a small Italian restaurant he had never noticed before, sitting across from Sarah in a corner booth. She had changed out of her scrubs into a simple black dress and cardigan, but she still looked tired and sad. You come here often? Marcus asked, looking around at the modest decor and the handful of other diners. Sometimes, when I need to think. The owner, Mrs. Romano, reminds me of my grandmother. Sarah managed a small smile. She always insists on feeding me too much. As if summoned by the mention of her name, an elderly Italian woman appeared at their table, her face lighting up when she saw Sarah. Sarah, my dear. You look too thin again. And who is this handsome man? Mrs. Romano, this is Marcus Kane. Marcus, this is Mrs. Romano. She makes the best lasagna in the city. Mrs. Romano beamed at Marcus. Any friend of Sarah's is family here. You take good care of this one. She has the biggest heart of anyone I know. After Mrs. Romano bustled away to bring them food they hadn't ordered, Marcus found himself studying Sarah across the table. She's right, you know, about your heart. Sarah looked uncomfortable with the compliment. Today didn't feel like enough. I couldn't save that little boy. His parents looked at me like I should have been able to do something more. You can't save everyone, Marcus said quietly. Even people with the biggest hearts can't fix everything that's broken in this world. Is that what happened to you? Sarah asked suddenly. Did you try to save someone and fail? Marcus felt his walls starting to rise again. But something about the way Sarah was looking at him with genuine curiosity rather than judgment made him want to answer honestly. I tried to save my father, he admitted, After his business partner betrayed him, after he lost everything, I begged him to let me help. I had started my company by then, was making good money, but he was too proud, said he wouldn't burden me with his mistakes. That must have been incredibly frustrating. It was more than frustrating. I watched him give up on everything, his health, his friendships, his faith in people. By the time I realized how sick he was, it was too late. He died believing he had been a fool to trust anyone. Sarah reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. The simple touch sent warmth shooting up Marcus's arm, and he realized how long it had been since anyone had touched him with genuine affection. "Your father wasn't a fool for trusting people," she said softly. "He was brave. It takes courage to keep believing in goodness even when the world tries to convince you otherwise." "Courage?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "It got him nothing but heartbreak." "It got him you," Sarah pointed out. "And it got him the respect of people like me, who saw how he treated others even when he was suffering." "That's not nothing, Marcus." Mrs. Romano returned with plates piled high with lasagna, garlic bread, and salad, fussing over them like a grandmother feeding her grandchildren. Marcus found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't in years, listening to Sarah tell stories about her patients, her family, her dreams of traveling to places she had only seen in books. "What about you?" Sarah asked as they shared a piece of tiramisu that Mrs. Romano had insisted they try. "What did you want to be when you were a kid before you became this incredibly successful CEO?" Marcus paused, the question catching him off guard. "I wanted to be a teacher. Like my father." "Your father was a teacher?" "High school math." He loved helping kids understand complicated problems, showing them that things that seemed impossible were actually just puzzles waiting to be solved. You still do that in a way. You create solutions for complex problems, and it's not the same. I help companies make money. My father helped kids believe in themselves. Sarah was quiet for a moment, studying his face. "You could still do that, you know. Teach. Mentor young entrepreneurs. Show kids that success doesn't have to come at the cost of your humanity." Marcus felt something stir in his chest, a possibility he had never considered. "I don't think I'm qualified to teach anyone about humanity. I've spent 15 years avoiding it." "Maybe that's exactly what qualifies you," Sarah said. "You know what it costs to close yourself off from the world. You could help others avoid making the same mistake." As they left the restaurant, Marcus walked Sarah to her car, reluctant to let the evening end. Standing under the streetlight in the parking lot, he found himself looking at her in a way that felt dangerous and wonderful at the same time. "Thank you," Sarah said softly, "for tonight, for making sure I didn't spend it alone with my thoughts." "Thank you for letting me," Marcus replied. "I can't remember the last time I had dinner with someone who didn't want something from me." "What makes you think I don't want something from you?" Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. "What do you want?" Sarah stepped closer, and Marcus caught a hint of her perfume, something light and clean that reminded him of spring mornings. "I want you to consider the possibility that your father was right. That love isn't weakness. That trusting people, caring about them, letting them care about you, that's what makes life worth living." Before Marcus could respond, Sarah reached up and kissed his cheek softly, her lips barely brushing his skin. The simple gesture sent shockwaves through his entire body, awakening feelings he had buried so deep he had forgotten they existed. "Good night, Marcus," she whispered, then got in her car and drove away, leaving him standing alone under the streetlight with his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. As Marcus drove home to his empty penthouse apartment, he realized that Sarah Chen had just done something no one had managed to do in 15 years. She had made him want to be vulnerable again, made him want to risk his heart for the possibility of something real and meaningful. For the first time since his father's death, Marcus Kane was beginning to understand the difference between existing and living, and for the first time in his adult life, he was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, love was worth the risk. The kiss on the cheek had haunted Marcus for 3 days. He found himself touching the spot where Sarah's lips had brushed his skin, remembering the warmth and gentleness of the gesture. It was such a small thing, yet it had shaken him to his core. On Thursday morning, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of heading straight to his office, he drove to a small elementary school in Sarah's neighborhood. He had done some research and learned that she volunteered there on weekends helping children with reading difficulties. The principal, Mrs. Henderson, was delighted to meet him. "Mr. Kane!" "What an unexpected pleasure," Sarah has told us so much about the wonderful work you're doing at the hospital. Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest at the thought that Sarah had been talking about him. I was hoping to learn more about your reading program. I'm considering expanding my company's community outreach. Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up. We desperately need help. So many of our children struggle with reading, and we don't have enough volunteers or resources. Sarah is one of our most dedicated helpers. As they walked through the school hallways, Marcus saw artwork covering the walls, children's laughter echoing from classrooms, and teachers who looked genuinely happy to be there. It reminded him of his father's classroom, of the pride in his voice when he talked about his students. Would you like to observe one of our reading sessions? Mrs. Henderson asked. Sarah will be here this Saturday morning. Marcus agreed, though he wasn't sure what he was getting himself into. Saturday morning found him sitting in a small classroom, watching Sarah work with a group of 7-year-olds who were struggling to read basic sentences. She was patient and encouraging with each child, celebrating small victories and gently correcting mistakes without making anyone feel embarrassed. Marcus watched her help a little boy named Carlos sound out the word butterfly, her face lighting up when he finally read it correctly. Mr. Marcus, Carlos called out suddenly, noticing him in the corner. Miss Sarah said you build things with computers. Can you teach me? Sarah looked surprised to see Marcus there, but she smiled warmly. Carlos, Mr. Kane is very busy. He's here to observe our reading program. Actually, Marcus found himself saying, I'd love to show Carlos a few things about computers, if that's okay with everyone. What followed was one of the most unexpected mornings of Marcus's life. He found himself explaining basic computer concepts to a group of curious children, helping them understand how technology could be used to solve problems and create beautiful things. Their enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time in years, Marcus felt the same joy his father used to describe when talking about teaching. After the children left for lunch, Sarah approached him with a mixture of admiration and curiosity in her eyes. That was amazing, she said. You're a natural teacher. Carlos hasn't shown that much interest in anything since his father left last year. Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest at the mention of an absent father. How does a 7-year-old deal with abandonment? The same way a 34-year-old does, I imagine, Sarah said gently. He builds walls to protect himself from being hurt again. Marcus looked at her sharply, recognizing the parallel she was drawing. That's different. Carlos is innocent. He didn't choose to have his father leave. Neither did you, Sarah pointed out. Your father didn't choose to die, Marcus. He didn't abandon you on purpose. But his choices led to his death, Marcus said, his voice hard. His trust in the wrong people, his refusal to let me help him, those were choices. Sarah stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. And what about your choices? You've spent 15 years punishing yourself for his mistakes. When do you get to choose happiness? Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. It was Jennifer, calling about an emergency board meeting. A major client was threatening to leave, and Marcus needed to handle the situation immediately. I have to go, he said reluctantly, already feeling the familiar pull of his business responsibilities. Of course, Sarah said, but Marcus caught a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. Thank you for coming today. It meant a lot to the children. As Marcus drove back to his office, he found himself torn between two worlds. In one world, he was Marcus Kane, the powerful CEO who could solve any business problem and control every aspect of his professional life. In the other world, he was just Marcus, a man who could make children laugh and feel the warmth of a woman's genuine affection. The board meeting lasted 4 hours. Marcus managed to save the client relationship and secure an even larger contract, but the victory felt hollow. All he could think about was the way Carlos had looked at him with admiration, the way Sarah had smiled when she saw him connecting with the children. That evening, Marcus found himself at Sarah's apartment building. He hadn't called ahead, wasn't even sure what he wanted to say, but he needed to see her. Sarah answered the door in pajama pants and an oversized sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked surprised but pleased to see him. Marcus, is everything okay? Can I come in? I need to talk to you about something. Sarah's apartment was small but warm, filled with books, plants, and photographs of family and friends. It was the opposite of Marcus's sterile penthouse, and he found it incredibly comforting. I've been thinking about what you said today, Marcus began, then stopped, struggling to find the right words. About choosing happiness. Sarah curled up in an armchair across from him. waiting patiently for him to continue. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted. "I don't know how to trust that good things won't be taken away from me." "It's not about guarantees," Sarah said softly. "It's about deciding that the possibility of love and joy is worth the risk of loss and pain." "What if I hurt you?" Marcus asked, voicing his deepest fear. "What if I'm too damaged to be what you deserve?" Sarah got up from her chair and sat beside him on the couch, taking his hands in hers. "Marcus, I work with people who are fighting for their lives every day. I've learned that none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. But that doesn't mean we should waste today being afraid to live." Marcus looked down at their joined hands, amazed by how right it felt. "I haven't felt this scared since my father died." "Good," Sarah said, squeezing his hands gently. "That means what's happening between us matters to you." "It terrifies me how much it matters," Marcus confessed. "I've built my entire life around not needing anyone, and now I can't stop thinking about you. I want to know everything about you. What makes you laugh, what makes you cry, what you dream about when you're alone." Sarah leaned closer, her eyes soft and understanding. "That's what caring about someone feels like, Marcus. It's supposed to be scary and wonderful at the same time." Marcus reached up and touched her face gently, marveling at how soft her skin was. "I don't want to be the kind of man who takes and never gives back. I don't want to be selfish with your heart." "Then don't be," Sarah whispered. "Choose to be the man your father raised you to be. Choose to be brave enough to love someone." When Marcus kissed her, it was with 15 years of buried emotion, 15 years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope. Sarah kissed him back with equal intensity, and Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him, like a door opening after being locked for too long. When they finally broke apart, Marcus rested his forehead against hers, breathing hard. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "I don't know how to be in a relationship." "Neither do I," Sarah admitted with a small laugh. "I've spent so much time taking care of everyone else that I forgot how to let someone take care of me." "Maybe we can figure it out together," Marcus suggested, the words feeling foreign but right on his tongue. "Maybe we can," Sarah agreed, and when she smiled at him, Marcus finally understood what his father had meant about love being the only thing that made people truly strong. For the first time in 15 years, Marcus Kane was ready to stop running from his heart and start running toward the possibility of a life filled with love, trust, and the kind of happiness he had thought was lost forever. 3 months into their relationship, Marcus was discovering that love was nothing like he had expected. It wasn't the weakness he had feared, but it wasn't simple either. Every day brought new challenges as he learned to balance his need for control with Sarah's gentle insistence that some of life's best moments came from letting go. Their first real test came on a rainy Tuesday morning when Sarah called him at work, her voice strained with exhaustion. "Marcus, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need a favor. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, no relation, she fell and broke her hip. She has no family nearby, and I promised I'd help her get to her medical appointments. Could you possibly—" "I'll send a car service," Marcus interrupted, already reaching for his phone to call his assistant. "No, that's not what I mean. She's scared and confused. She needs someone to actually go with her, to hold her hand and make sure she understands what the doctors are saying." Marcus paused, his finger hovering over Jennifer's extension. "Sarah, I have a board meeting at 10 and a conference call with Tokyo at 2. "I can't. I know you're busy," Sarah said quickly. "I was hoping maybe you could just be there with me. I know it sounds silly, but having you there would make me feel better about leaving her alone." Marcus felt the familiar pull between his business obligations and this new, unfamiliar desire to be the person Sarah needed him to be. "How long would it take?" "Maybe 3 hours. I promise I'll never ask you to do anything like this again." Marcus looked at his calendar, then at the photograph of his father that he had finally placed on his desk next to the wooden box Sarah had brought him. He made a decision that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. "I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. The surprise and gratitude in Sarah's voice made something warm bloom in his chest. "Really? You don't have to, Marcus. I know how important your work is." "You're important too," he said, and meant it. Mrs. Chen turned out to be an 80-year-old retired librarian who reminded Marcus painfully of his father. Kind, dignified, and determined not to be a burden to anyone. She clutched Sarah's hand throughout the doctor's appointment and looked at Marcus with grateful eyes when he helped her into the wheelchair. "You're very lucky, dear," Mrs. Chen told Sarah as Marcus wheeled her to the pharmacy to pick up her medications. Not many men would give up their morning for a stranger. He's special, Sarah agreed, reaching over to squeeze Marcus's shoulder. He's still figuring out just how special. Though, after they got Mrs. Chen settled back in her apartment, Marcus found himself helping Sarah organize the elderly woman's medications and making sure she had easy access to food and water. It was the kind of simple, practical kindness that his father had always excelled at, and Marcus was surprised by how natural it felt. "Thank you," Sarah said as they walked back to Marcus's car. "I know you had important meetings today." "They can wait," Marcus said, surprising himself with how easily the words came. Mrs. Chen couldn't. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him, her eyes bright with emotion. "Do you know what you just did? Helped an old lady get her medications?" "You chose love over fear," Sarah said simply. "You chose to be present for someone who needed you, even though it meant giving up control of your schedule." Marcus felt something shift inside him, a recognition that Sarah was right. For months he had been terrified that caring about her would make him weak, distracted, less capable of running his company. Instead, he was finding that love was making him more focused on what truly mattered. That evening, Marcus made another decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He called an emergency meeting with his executive team and announced that he was promoting his COO, Rebecca Martinez, to President of Operations. "I'll remain CEO," he explained to the shocked faces around the conference table, "but I want to delegate more of the day-to-day operations. I have some other projects I want to focus on." After the meeting, Rebecca approached him privately. "Marcus, are you sure about this? You've never trusted anyone else with this level of responsibility before." Marcus thought about Sarah's words about choosing love over fear. Maybe it's time I learned to trust people again. The other projects Marcus had mentioned turned out to be more meaningful than anyone could have imagined. He began spending 1 day a week at the elementary school, teaching children basic computer programming and watching their faces light up when they created their first simple animations. He also started mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing not just business knowledge but life lessons about the importance of maintaining relationships while building success. Sarah watched these changes with pride and amazement. "You're becoming the man your father always knew you could be," she told him one evening as they walked through the park near her apartment. "I'm becoming the man you make me want to be," Marcus corrected, pulling her closer as they sat on a bench overlooking the pond. "That's not how it works," Sarah said gently. "I can't make you be anything. I can only love you for who you already are and support you as you become who you want to be." Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching ducks glide across the water. "I used to think love was about possession, about holding on so tightly that nothing could take it away from you. And now I think love is about trust. About believing that someone will choose to stay not because they have to, but because they want to." Sarah turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you." Marcus felt his old anxieties rise up, the familiar fear that someone was about to leave him or betray him. "What is it?" "I've been offered a position with Doctors Without Borders. It's a 6-month assignment in Guatemala, working with children who have limited access to medical care." Marcus felt like the world had tilted off its axis. "When would you leave?" "In 2 months. Marcus, I applied for this position before I met you. It's something I've always dreamed of doing. But now you're not sure if you want to go," Marcus finished, recognizing the conflict in her voice. "I don't want to leave you," Sarah admitted, "but I also don't want to regret not taking this opportunity. I don't know what to do." Marcus felt every instinct screaming at him to ask her to stay, to use his influence or money to convince her that she belonged here with him. But then he remembered his father's voice, remembered the lessons about love being about giving rather than taking. "You have to go," he said quietly. Sarah looked shocked. "What? You have to go," Marcus repeated, his voice stronger now. "This is your dream, Sarah. This is who you are, someone who cares about children who have no one else to help them. I can't ask you to give up who you are for me." "But what about us?" Marcus took her hands in his, amazed by how calm he felt despite the pain growing in his chest. "If what we have is real, it will survive 6 months. And if it doesn't, then we'll know it wasn't meant to be." Sarah started crying and Marcus pulled her close, holding her as she sobbed against his shoulder. I love you, she whispered. I love you so much and I'm terrified of losing you. I love you too, Marcus said, the words coming easier each time he said them. But love isn't about holding on out of fear. It's about letting go out of trust. As they sat there in the gathering darkness, holding each other and facing the possibility of separation, Marcus realized that Sarah had done more than just melt the walls around his heart. She had taught him that real strength came not from protecting yourself from loss, but from loving someone enough to risk everything for their happiness. For the first time in his life, Marcus Kane was about to learn whether love was stronger than fear, whether trust was more powerful than control, and whether the man he had become was strong enough to let the woman he loved follow her dreams, even if it meant facing the possibility of losing her. The 2 months before Sarah's departure passed in a blur of bittersweet moments. Marcus found himself treasuring every small interaction. The way she hummed while making coffee, the way she fell asleep reading medical journals, the way she unconsciously reached for his hand when they walked together. He was storing up memories like someone preparing for a long winter. The night before Sarah left for Guatemala, they sat on the roof of Marcus's building, looking out over the city lights. The David Kane pediatric wing had been completed the week before, and they could see the hospital in the distance, its windows glowing warmly in the darkness. Are you scared? Marcus asked, his arm around Sarah as she leaned against his shoulder. Terrified, Sarah admitted. Not about the work, I know I can handle that. But about us, about whether what we have is strong enough to survive the distance and time apart. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. 6 months ago, he would have been making demands, setting ultimatums, trying to control the situation to guarantee the outcome he wanted. Now he was learning to trust in something bigger than his own need for certainty. Do you remember what you told me the first night we had dinner together? He asked. About love not being about guarantees? Sarah smiled against his shoulder. I remember. I'm choosing to believe that what we have is worth the risk, Marcus said. I'm choosing to trust that 6 months from now we'll both be stronger and more sure of what we mean to each other. And if we're not, then we'll have given each other something beautiful even if it wasn't permanent. That's more than I ever thought I'd have. The next morning at the airport, Marcus held Sarah close, breathing in her scent and feeling the warmth of her body against his. Around them, other couples were saying goodbye, some crying, some laughing, all dealing with the pain of separation in their own ways. I'll write to you every day, Sarah promised, her voice muffled against his chest. I'll be here when you get back, Marcus replied. Whatever you need, whatever you've decided, I'll be here. As Sarah's flight was called, she pulled back to look at him one last time. Marcus Kane, you are nothing like the man I met 8 months ago. Is that good or bad? It's everything, Sarah said, standing on her toes to kiss him one final time. You're everything. Watching her plane disappear into the clouds was one of the hardest things Marcus had ever done. But he didn't break down. Instead, he drove to the elementary school where he taught his programming classes and spent the day helping children create digital art projects. The joy on their faces reminded him that love wasn't just about romantic relationships, it was about opening your heart to all the ways you could make a difference in the world. The first few weeks without Sarah were difficult. Marcus threw himself into work and his volunteer activities, but the apartment felt empty, and he found himself picking up his phone to call her dozens of times before remembering the time difference and her limited access to communication. Then, 3 weeks after she left, he received his first letter. It was 8 pages long, filled with stories about the children she was treating, the challenges of working with limited resources, and how much she missed him. But what struck Marcus most was the joy that radiated from every word. Sarah was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was born to do. Marcus wrote back immediately, telling her about his students, about the changes he was making at the company, about how Mrs. Chen was recovering and had started volunteering at the hospital gift shop. He found himself sharing thoughts and feelings he had never been able to express in person, and their correspondence became a deeper form of intimacy than he had ever experienced. As the months passed, Marcus continued to grow and change. He established a scholarship fund for underprivileged children who wanted to study technology. He began speaking at conferences about the importance of work-life balance and corporate social responsibility. He even started having lunch with his employees, something that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Rebecca Martinez pulled him aside after one of their quarterly reviews. "Marcus, I have to ask, what happened to you? You're like a completely different person." Marcus thought about how to answer. "I learned the difference between being strong and being afraid," he said finally. "I learned that real power comes from lifting other people up, not from protecting yourself from them. It's because of Sarah, isn't it?" "The nurse?" Marcus nodded. "She taught me that love isn't something that weakens you. It's something that reveals who you really are." 5 months into Sarah's assignment, Marcus received a phone call that changed everything. Sarah was crying, something he had rarely heard her do. "Marcus, there's been an accident," she said through her tears. "A little girl named Maria. She reminds me so much of Emma from the hospital back home. She needs surgery that we can't perform here, and her family has no money to get her the care she needs." Marcus didn't hesitate. "What does she need?" "Transportation to a pediatric cardiac surgeon in Mexico City, surgery, and probably a month of recovery care. It would cost at least $50,000, money her family doesn't have." "Done," Marcus said. "I'll have the money transferred today. Do you need me to arrange for medical transport?" "Marcus, you can't just—" "Yes, I can," he said firmly. "This is what money is for, Sarah. This is what success is supposed to accomplish." "I love you," Sarah whispered. "I love you so much it hurts." "I love you too," Marcus replied. "Save that little girl." "That's what you do, you save people." 2 weeks later, Marcus received a video call from Sarah. Behind her, he could see a hospital room where a small girl with dark hair was sitting up in bed, coloring in a coloring book. "Marcus, I want you to meet Maria," Sarah said, turning the camera toward the little girl. "Maria, this is the man I told you about. He's the one who made sure you could get better." Maria looked up at the camera with bright, curious eyes. "Gracias, Señor Marcus," she said in careful English. "Miss Sarah says you have a good heart." Marcus felt tears he hadn't expected welling up in his eyes. "Tell her she's very welcome and that I hope she feels better soon." After Maria went back to her coloring, Sarah turned the camera back to herself. "1 more month," she said softly. "1 more month and I'll be home." "Take your time," Marcus said, though every fiber of his being wanted her back immediately. "Finish your work. These children need you. I need you too," Sarah said. "I've missed you every single day. I've missed you too. But Sarah, I need to tell you something. I'm not the same man you left 6 months ago." Sarah looked worried. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm better. I'm the man I was always supposed to be. The man you helped me remember I could be. When you come back, you're not coming back to someone who needs you to complete him. You're coming back to someone who chooses to love you because you make everything in life more beautiful." The smile that spread across Sarah's face was brighter than any sunrise Marcus had ever seen. "I can't wait to meet this new version of you." "I think you'll like him," Marcus said. "He's learned how to love without fear, how to trust without guarantees, and how to be strong enough to let the people he loves be exactly who they're meant to be." When Sarah's plane landed a month later, Marcus was waiting at the gate with a single red rose and a heart that had learned the difference between needing someone and choosing them. As she ran into his arms, he realized that his father had been right all along. Love wasn't weakness. Love was the strongest force in the universe, capable of transforming even the most broken heart into something beautiful and whole. 6 months later, Marcus proposed to Sarah in the children's ward of the hospital, surrounded by the kids they had both grown to love. When she said yes, Carlos, now 8 years old and reading at grade level, cheered loudly and announced to everyone that his teacher, Mr. Marcus, was marrying the prettiest nurse in the whole world. Marcus Kane had spent 15 years building walls around his heart, convinced that isolation was strength and that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. But Sarah Chen had shown him that real strength came from vulnerability, that true power came from service, and that the greatest success in life was measured not by what you accumulated, but by what you gave away. As they stood together in the hospital where his father had died, where Sarah worked to save lives every day, where children learned to hope again despite their circumstances, Marcus finally understood what his father had been trying to tell him all those years ago. Love wasn't something that made you weak. It was something that made you invincible.